These are scenes of the carrier Glorious in August 1935, sailing for another peacetime Mediterranean commission. Later in the program, we will see her tragic demise. But in the meantime, as we watch these early historical views of naval aviation unfold, I will endeavor to restrict the narrative to a minimum, and thus afford, perhaps, a greater visual appreciation of this rare film, which had been taken privately by one of her ship's officers. Amazingly, the Glorious operated 5 different types of aircraft: Nimrods, Ospreys, Seals, Baffins, and Fairey 111s. And this wide variation did lead to complications of flight deck handling, maintenance, and spare parts, which were often needed due to landings such as this.
Look out on deck, aircraft landing on.
Slowly, take it slowly now.
Royal Air Force personnel seen here also served on board, for it was not until 1938 that the Navy regained control of its own aviation.
Let's go!
Here the Glorious arrives in Malta, being immediately followed by preparations for an aerial torpedo exercise. Pictured here are views of early experimental catapult launches, though sadly, the original footage of this section had been printed in reverse, and I was unable to gain permission to film, cut, and correct this fault. Interesting to note the boffin and the trilby hat observing the proceedings. This ill-fated takeoff succeeded in removing part of the foremast of the attendant destroyer. Of course, these were early days of naval aviation, being still somewhat precarious as witnessed by this Stidge observation seaplane belonging to a County-class cruiser. while undercarriage failures were far too frequent with aircraft that had been primarily designed for land-based RAF squadrons, a problem which continued to persist through World War II. I suspect this to be a pilotless radio-controlled aircraft being launched for gunnery exercise, though perhaps the final result was not quite what was expected.
Open fire!
Seen ahead is the Courageous, and in company with other units of the Home Fleet, a joint sea exercise was held in March 1937. Normally, such events would occur off Gibraltar, but due to the Spanish Civil War, it took place far into the Atlantic, being marred by this bad weather. The captain seen here was Bruce Fraser, and later in the program we will see much more of this legendary figure. Meanwhile, his attention is concerned with the battle cruiser Hood seen sailing off the port beam.
Well, I think that's all, gentlemen.
With the storm now moderated, aircraft are ranged on deck, and the RAF flight commander then requests permission for takeoff.
Ready for takeoff, sir.
Carry on, Commander.
Bidding a fond farewell to the 1st Cruiser Squadron and HMS Repulse, the Glorious departs Malta for Devonport to pay off after completing her 2-year commission. However, her next return engagement, which began in January 1938, would be her last, for as we shall later see, it was all to end in very tragic circumstances. And here again is the Repulse, some 3 years later, seen in this remarkable footage filmed from the decks of HMS Hood when on a wartime patrol in northern waters. The gunfire sequences must only be a practice shoot, for history dictates they never reported any sightings of the enemy. In April of 1940, the Royal Navy's third battle cruiser, HMS Renown, seen here in these same waters, did sight the enemy, being the battleship Scharnhorst and Gneisenau. Conditions were far from ideal, but before they disappeared in a heavy rain squall, she managed to hit the Gneisenau, putting out of action her main armament control system. However, what the Renown and the Admiralty did not know was at the same time, German forces were landing in Norway virtually unopposed. The operation was extremely well prepared, and the surprise landings quickly consolidated. Yet the Allies assumed that probably only the southern regions of Norway would be the initial objective, making it perhaps possible for the Royal Navy to take control of the northern Narvik area and await the arrival of an Allied expeditionary force. Thus, the 2nd Destroyer Flotilla was allocated this task. The 2nd Flotilla comprised of the Hardy, Hunter, Havoc, Hotspur, and Hostile, and as they approached Vestfjord, Captain D learned that Narvik was already held by a strong German naval force. In the ensuing battle, which was never filmed and became known as the First Battle of Narvik, much damage was inflicted on the enemy, but the destroyer Hunter was sunk and Captain D was lost with the Hardy. By 1940, the capital strength of the home fleet had been weakened by the loss of the Royal Oak and extensive mine damage to the flagship HMS Nelson. And on New Year's Day, the C&C Admiral Forbes hoisted his flag on the Rodney, seen here about the same period. In April, when operating some 60 miles off the Norwegian coast, she was hit by a very large bomb. Luckily, it only partially detonated and caused little damage. Similar in appearance, the cruiser Curlew was bombed and sunk off Narvik, but meanwhile, preparations are quickly made to embark an Allied force to Norway. It would be doomed from the outset.
Think of you can't follow me! Come on! Come on! Come on then, sir! Come on! Come on, so move, gentlemen. I want you down there. Come on!
These hastily assembled convoys created a hive of activity on the Clyde and in the Firth of Forth, with some troops even being embarked directly onto warships at Scapa Flow, for such was the urgency. Destroyers, as usual, were in constant need. The cruisers about to be seen here could be any from the Galatea, Aurora, and Arethusa, for each took part in these convoy operations. The destination of this particular convoy is not documented, but all Allied landings did take place in the northern regions of Namsos, Aldersness, and Narvik, where German spearheads had only a slender hold.
Bearing 71 degrees, repeat, 71 degrees.
The harbor's dead ahead. Won't be long now.
Little would they guess that within a few short weeks they would all be faced with re-embarkation under much more trying circumstances. In the meantime, these are surviving film fragments taken probably in West Fjord on board what would appear to be an unknown tribal-class destroyer. About to follow are scenes of the bombed and damaged battleship Resolution, being hove to as survivors from the Polish destroyer Grom are transferred from the flotilla leader Faulkner, while D-44 is the ill-fated Imogen.
Do you hear that? Do you hear that? Damage control party, lay aft. Forecastle party, muster at the double. GPR Air Kirby, report the duty office.
Going alongside.
Come on, you lot! Then move on!
Offense position!
There does appear to be film of the rescue of those survivors, for I feel certain we are now at Offord Fjord on board another tribal-class destroyer, which would have to be the Bedouin. The Grom appears with a false-painted bow wave shortly before being bombed, and probably a censor may have destroyed film of the actual sinking. Standing by will be seen the cruiser Enterprise and again HMS Faulkner.
Don't panic. It's going, look, it's moving. Don't panic. Go back to... That's good.
All hands remain closed up and short range weapons for first degree readiness.
We get the fire over as fast as we can.
Being restricted of movement in the fjords, warships such as the Aurora seen here were extremely vulnerable to air attack, and there is little doubt the onslaught by the Luftwaffe did play a decisive role in the decision to quickly terminate operations in Norway. Barely 2 weeks after the initial landings, Namsos was being evacuated, and HMS York, now in camera view, was one of the escorts of this last returning convoy, which we will shortly see under heavy air attack. Other cruisers included the Carlisle and Devonshire, and of the escorting destroyers, the Afridi would be bombed and sunk, but no footage appears to exist of that sad event. To reinforce the Navy's slender air cover, the Glorious was withdrawn from the Mediterranean in April, had her sister carrier, Courageous, not been foolishly lost during the first month of the war. It is highly likely she would have remained in the Med. Finding footage today of her operating off Norway is sadly almost impossible, as indeed any other warships. But I have pieced together these following odd items I have found, like this onboard view of the Valiant retrieving her paravanes. Transferred on board were German personnel, who I strongly suspect came off the U-49, which had been blown to the surface and floored by the destroyers Brazen and Fearless.
Follow me, quickly! Starting on forward!
This is the battleship Rodney, followed by a very brief glimpse of the cruiser Vindictive. Now the destroyer Hotspur with Glorious in the distance. Bomb damage was inflicted on the cruisers Southampton and Glasgow, and the carrier Furious also suffered damage by a near miss off Tromsø. The Ark Royal was still the Navy's main fleet carrier, being operated extensively off Norway, though it is doubtful she would have been operating these Fulmer aircraft at that time. Finally, what we're about to see are units of the fleet under heavy air attack, which will also show a near miss on the Ark Royal and one close to Glorious, followed by some longer scenes of the Furious and Warspite heavily engaged.
And here they come, the dive bomber.
On a fateful day in June 1940, and for reasons which are still highly controversial, for the official explanation does leave many questions unanswered, the Glorious requested and received permission to detach herself from the main fleet and sail independently to Scapa Flow, being escorted by the two destroyers Ardent and Acasta. Long before the end of that fearful day, this decision would lead to the deaths of some 97% of all three ships' companies, for, unknown to the Admiralty, a large German task force was now operating in those Arctic waters between Norway and the Orkneys, ostensibly to intercept returning transports and convoys. And with German archive footage filmed from the decks of Scharnhorst, I have pieced together these scenes which now depict this extremely tragic day.
In der Warslinie geht es weiter vorwärts nach Norden. Aufklärer werden von den Schlachtschiffen katapultiert.
The first victims were the tanker Oil Pioneer and the anti-submarine trawler HMS Juniper.
Dann ein wohlgezielter Torpedoschuss und auch der Ölpionier ist erledigt. Die schiffbrüchige Besatzung wird von unseren Zerstörern an Bord genommen.
Being confronted by the Scharnhorst, Gneisenau and Admiral Hipper must have been an awesome experience for these 29 survivors.
20.000 Tonnen großen Truppentransporter Orama Jagd gemacht.
Next came the troop ship Orama, which, fortunately, was traveling empty. Yet ironically, of the 275 survivors rescued, 100 were captured German prisoners of war, and for them at least, it was their lucky day.
Die Mannschaft ist den großen Rettungsbooten von Bord gegangen. Brennend sinkt die Orama in die Tiefe. Die scharfen Schläge des deutschen Schwertes zu spüren bekommen, das nun Britannien zum Entscheidungskampf zwingt.
After sinking the Orama, the Admiral Hipper and destroyers parted company, leaving the Scharnos and Gneisenau to hunt jointly together. They would soon be rewarded when, late on the afternoon of June 8th, smoke was sighted off the starboard quarter, and amazingly, for reasons which will never be known, the Glorious did not have any reconnaissance patrol in flight. It would now cost her dearly. Desperately, the Ardent and Acasta strived to lay a protective smokescreen, but the odds were too heavily stacked against them. Indeed, only one crew member from each destroyer would survive, and just a mere 38 from the Glorious.
Ist bereits schwer getroffen. Die englischen Zerstörer versuchen, den Flugzeugträger einzunebeln und damit der Sicht zu entziehen. Vergebens. Der Feind wird nicht mehr losgelassen. Immer wieder überschüttet Schnellfeuer schwersten Kalibers den Gegner.
The three British warships were being completely overwhelmed, though Acasta did succeed in hitting the Scharnhorst by torpedo. It would not be until the following day that the Admiralty would learn of their loss, paradoxically, via a German radio broadcast.
Die Glorious steht in Flammen. Die begleitenden Zerstörer sind schwer beschädigt und sinken im weiteren Verlauf des Gefechtes.
With the Glorious now well into her final death throes, perhaps these following scenes may help to convey the desperate conditions which her crew members would have now been experiencing. We now move forward in time some 3.5 years when HMS Duke of York, seen here, was flagship of the home fleet. And using the most suitable film I could find, though incredibly limited it was, I will endeavor to relate the events concerned with the Battle of North Cape in as few words as possible. Initially, in December 1943, the Duke of York sailed east from Iceland in company with the cruiser Jamaica and 4 S-class destroyers, being part of a covering force of a convoy to Russia, which the C&C, Admiral Bruce Fraser, had correctly surmised would be liable to attack by our old friend, the Scharnhorst. On this same day of December 23rd, another force, comprising of the Norfolk, Sheffield and Belfast, flying the flag of Vice Admiral Burnett, sailed from Kola Inlet to eventually meet up with this convoy, which was coded JW-55B. all being part of a die-cast plan to entrap the Scharnhorst should she venture from an Arctic base in Norway to attack this Murmansk-bound supply group. A homeward-bound convoy had also sailed from Kola, and 4 of the destroyer escorts, Virago, Opportune, Matchless, and Musketeer, were ordered to detach and join the likely targeted eastward-bound ships. Fraser's set pieces would then all be in place. With the sending of the Scharnhorst, Tirpitz, and Lutzow to northern Norway in March 1943, a powerful threat was created, and, combined with the long hours of Arctic daylight, it brought a halt to all convoy sailings to Russia. But after the Tirpitz had been immobilized by the famous midget submarine attack, and Lutzow returned to the Baltic for a refit, convoy operations had resumed in the middle of November. The following month, when German air reconnaissance reported another eastward-bound convoy, the bait became too irresistible for Scharnhorst's temporary group commander, a Rear Admiral Erik Bay, and in company with 5 destroyers, she sailed from Altenfjord late in the afternoon of Christmas Day to intercept. However, the Luftwaffe had failed to spot the warship groups of Fraser and Burnett, and, as we shall later see, the renowned luck of the Scharnhorst was about to turn full circle. Proceeding on an orderly course, it was anticipated the convoy would be intercepted early the following day. The destroyers alone would constitute a grave threat, given that they were all powerfully armed with 5.9-inch guns. Belonging to the 4th Flotilla, they carried no names, being all prefixed with the letter Z followed by 2 digits. Sadly impersonal for any ships, and not generally liked by sailors. Early the next day, the destroyers were ordered to spread out for a reconnaissance sweep, but with the seas beginning to rise due to storm-force winds, they would start to find the going very heavy as their new course headed them right into the teeth of a howling gale. pressed on alone as the destroyers were forced to reduce speed, and in fact she would never again see her escorts. But she was seen by radar on board the Belfast, and as Admiral Burnett ran full ahead to intercept, she would be taken completely by surprise at being suddenly exposed by overhead star shells. At high speed, the Shah-North broke off the engagement and gradually drew away, for her main objective was still the destruction of the convoy and nut-gun action with HM cruisers. Unable to pursue, and believing Admiral Bay would now hastily steer on a new attacking course, Burnett quickly turned his force towards the now endangered convoy. In view is HMS Norfolk. Joining the convoy for the first time, Burnett positioned his ships anticipating the Shah-North would eventually make her attacking approach from the north, and this assumption proved correct, thus setting the stage for this second encounter. Dismayed being once again confronted by Burnett's cruisers, Admiral Bay, giving careful thought to his strict operational brief, decided he must now abort the operation and return to base. Unknowingly, he now turns towards the Jamaica and Duke of York, who were rapidly approaching from the southwest, and the Shah-North was about to receive her final surprise.
Check.
Artillerie klar zum Feuern.
Anton, Feuer! Feuer!
It is our good fortune that the finer details of this action will be related personally by Admirals Fraser and Burnett later in the program. But for the moment, suffice to say that after receiving massive battle damage, the Shah-North capsized and went down by the bow. In spite of warships searching almost 1 hour for survivors, the Scorpion picked up only 30 and the Matchless a further 6. Admiral Fraser would now sail his force triumphantly to Kola and refuel.
All right, steady, lads. Right.
Do you hear there? Do you hear there? Forecastle party to muster. Forecastle party to muster.
Right now, come along, you lads. Let's see you move.
Right, you will note the decks of Her Majesty's ships are kept spotlessly clean.
Tied alongside the Duke of York are the destroyers Savage and Scorpion.
All destroyer crews muster on deck for the newsreel camera.
Okay, roll them, man.
Gun crews happily celebrate their victory, which, to their delight, is about to be acknowledged by the Commander-in-Chief.
By order of the Commander-in-Chief, splice the main race. Hands to mess for on.
Go! What's going on? Chop!
Visiting officers leave the flagship as the force quickly prepares to depart for Scapa Flow.
Stand by! Let go for it!
Much to their relief, Admiral Fraser had transferred the Charnois survivors to the Duke of York, having no desire to hand them over to the Russian authorities. After passing Hoxha Gate, the fleet dropped anchor in the flow December 31st, and without unnecessary dialogue, let us enjoy this triumphant spectacle, a sight which Scapa Flow will never see again. HMS Jamaica. HMS Sheffield. HMS Belfast. HMS Norfolk. Posing happily for the camera are Norfolk's Royal Marine gun crew.
Aye, aye, sir.
G-73 is HMS Meteor. She was one of the through escorts with the homeward bound convoy. A sister M-class destroyer, the Maratha, was later lost on a Russian convoy with there being only 17 survivors from a total complement of over 200. The waters of the Arctic could indeed be the most cruel of all seas. The Charnois survivors are about to disembark from the wrecked cross-drifter William Wilson. Surprisingly, one was found to have been a Canadian-born citizen. Certainly in hindsight, the blindfolds do seem embarrassingly severe, and some viewers may recall in an earlier program that no such landing ignominy was endured by those rescued from the Bismarck. Slowly we now approach the flagship, where various key figures will be found waiting on the quarterdeck to camera record for posterity some of their personal anecdotes of the Scharnhorst engagement, which eventually became known as the Battle of North Cape.
You hear that? Below the lily aft.
My Chief of Staff, Commodore Slater, was on the bridge with me, and I should like to thank him for all the advice he gave us before and during this action. Thank you, Commodore Slater. The flag captain was on the compass platform, and he handled his ship with great skill. And I'd like to thank the flag captain for all he's done for us. The Staff Officer of Operations, Captain Jellicoe, was in the plot, giving us all advice on what to do both before and during the action, and I'd like to thank him for all the work he's done. The only trouble about him, he's not in uniform.
I have the honour of being the captain of HMS Norfolk. I haven't much to say except that we were the first to sight the enemy. We were the first to open fire. We were the first to hit. And we were the first ship to be hit. And thank God the Scharnhorst was sunk. A grand ending and a very grand crew to be in command of.
I am Chief Estimator of Norfolk, Director Layout. Just prior to going into action with Scharnhorst, our captain, Captain Bain, told us that he would put Norfolk in the right place. It was up to the gunnery boys to put the shots in the right place. I am very proud to say this is what we did, and we hit her.
I am Commander Merrick, captain of the destroyer Savage. On December the 26th, at 1640, when 4 S-class destroyers were released to the attack by the Commander-in-Chief Home Fleet. As we left the Duke of York, she opened fire, first of all with star shells, and then with 14-inch, over our heads. It was a magnificent, if rather awe-inspiring spectacle. Shortly afterwards, the Scharnhorst, ahead of us, opened fire in reply, firing in the first case at the Duke of York, though when the destroyers drew nearer, we did not escape her attention by any means.
Next is Commander Fisher, captain of the Musketeer.
Here around Bear Island, an old haunt of the Musketeers, and a perfectly beastly place it is. It's cold and rough and often snowing, and for 6 months of the year it's entirely dark, which thank goodness means that aeroplanes aren't seen. And it was our luck to be with the convoy that was attacked the other day. Can you imagine the thrill, after months and months of flogging up and down that pitch, to find that it was our convoy that was attacked and that our division was on the side that the attack came from? the Scharnhorst came straight in towards us, and we approached at a combined speed of something like 60 miles an hour, so that it didn't last long. Everybody was shooting. We weren't hurt. And I saw her hit by a salvo from one of the cruisers who were behind us when we were 4,000 yards from her. She instantly turned away, and we went after her. Unfortunately, she was too far away at that time for our torpedoes. After that, there was the most exhilarating chase for something like 100 miles at 30 knots in rough weather, and all the time we knew that there was big trouble waiting for that ship right ahead. Sometimes one felt sorry for them, and then one remembered that they had no business to be running away from what was chasing them then. At 7 o'clock in the evening, there were big gun flashes right ahead, and it was a thrilling moment when we all realized that the Duke of York was there. The enemy turned away to the east, and were very jealous of the Commander Merrick's division, that it was they who caught her up and fired their torpedoes and turned her. We were doing long stop at the other end of the pitch, and if she had come our way, we would have been the lucky ones.
I am Chief Yeoman of Signals, Hartlepool, of HMS Duke of York. And my position being on the bridge, I had a grandstand view of the whole show. And my word, what a show.
I'm Chief Photographer Thane of the Duke of York, Captain of B Turret. We fired 129 rounds at the Scharnhorst, some of which were accompanied by one or two witty remarks, such as, "This one is for adults, special, Christmas buttons." Another one marked, "This one's journey is really necessary." We're all proud to have had this chance of taking part in an action
as gunnery officer of the Duke of York. I won't give you a narrative of the course of events, because you must have read them many times already. Battle was forced on the enemy against his will, and this action formed the acid test of everything that makes the great hitting power of a ship like this. First the men, and then the machines.
The part that the cruisers had to play in this action was, from my point of view, a fairly simple one. I am glad to say that I had certain experience in these waters. I knew exactly what our Commander-in-Chief wished us to do. I was completely confident that the captain serving under me knew what was in my mind and would carry on exactly as I wished them, and that the officers and men in the ships that I was commanding would act as officers and men of the Royal Navy have always acted in action. As far as we were concerned, the battle had three phases. The first, we found the Scharnhorst and turned her away from the convoy. As she made round to try and find the convoy again, unfortunately, owing to the weather, I couldn't chase her, and so cut back to guard the convoy. We were lucky enough to find her where we expected her the second time, and the three cruisers engaged her down to fairly short range. It was just a question as to whether she would turn in time or not, and fortunately, I'm glad to say she did turn and fled to the southward. This was exactly what we had desired of her, and after a very considerable chase in the darkness, we managed to turn her over to the Commander-in-Chief, who was exactly where we expected him to be. He engaged her very heavily with the Duke of York and hit her very badly. But to my mind, the great feature of the conclusion of the action was the brilliantly gallant attack of the destroyers, which finally slowed her down so that the Commander-in-Chief in the Duke of York could finish her off in less time than it would have taken him had he to chase to the eastward for a long time. The cruisers, under my command, did what I had expected them to do, and their conduct was all and more than I could possibly have wished for.
Following Admiral Burnett, the Commander-in-Chief himself, Admiral Bruce Fraser, has the final word.
Last June, I said to the Home Fleet, yours is a very difficult task, watching and waiting in this grim climate with little excitement or relaxation, so near to home and yet so far. And yet, at any moment we may come into action and we must be instantly ready. We were ready. I felt very strongly that the Scharnhorst would come out. I knew my cruisers, with their usual pugnacity, under Admiral Burnett, would drive off the enemy from the convoy. But they could not cripple such powerful a ship as the Scharnhorst. So as soon as I knew that the Scharnhorst was out, the Duke of York, with her small force, steamed as fast as a heavy following sea would allow towards the Norwegian coast to intercept the convoy, to intercept the Scharnhorst. Undue prominence should not be given to this battle amongst the many which the Navy fights with big and little ships all over the world. But all my life I have admired the British bluejacket not only for his qualities, but for his remarkable character. I admired him that day most of all. I would like to say one word of thanks to all those men who are continually building, improving, and bringing our ships up to date. Good luck to you all.
In June 1944, Admiral Fraser hauled down his flag in the home fleet and traveled east to pursue the buildup of naval forces against Japan and in the war as C&C of the BPF. In 1948, he was promoted Admiral of the Fleet, being, without doubt, one of Britain's foremost admirals of the 20th century and much loved throughout the Royal Navy. In 1981, he crossed the bar at the grand old age of 93. Life for him had indeed been a long, eventful voyage.